Okay, hello. Yep, hello. Let's check the old computer. Yep. Right. Well, hello and welcome to the Zoom group. It's called a group, but it's not really a group. I'm just sitting here and you're just sitting there. So it's really just you and me. Even though it's called a group and there are other people here, in your well, like what you're actually experiencing is just you sitting wherever you are, doing whatever you are doing, and me. And even I'm not really there, I'm just there on a sort of screen. The energy, I suppose, of me is there. But I just say that because it's easy to kind of get the idea of groups and, have an idea of the way things were, which was like somebody on a stage and lots of people around, and you're part of the audience, a little bit passive, just listening, and, the person's imparting. That's not what's happening at all. You and I are having a conversation. And because it's Zoom, you don't have to be passive at all. You can completely uh, share the screen with me if you want, and be have a very interactive kind of experience. But even that, it's like it's easy to sort of feel like, oh, everyone's watching me. There's loads of people watching me. Yeah, maybe, maybe on YouTube, but like YouTube is not like a cinema, it's not like you're again standing on a stage. Like the world is going towards, and consciousness, as far as I see it, is going towards more authentic. And part of the more authentic is personal, one to one kind of interactions. I think the days of that, that kind of um, idealization are getting less. I mean, it's changing. You have a version of it on Instagram and on social media where people curate their lives and present themselves in not an authentic way, so that the part of you that would feel like you're not doing so good at your life, you're not as thin or as fit or as beautiful or as wealthy or as whatever as you would like, is being confirmed by this person who's giving you this very specific window into themselves, and you're feeling like, well, yeah, I should really be more tanned or less tanned or whatever. So there's a bit of that still on social media, but compared to the stadium with the person on the stage and they're giving forth, whether that's in song or in a cinema or whatever, that's getting less. And the current kind of what's happened in the last 6 months has broken that up even more. And I think that's a good thing because as I see it, as we're kind of the evolution of consciousness, which is, in one way, it is evolving, in another way, it's eternally the same consciousness. In my experience, not that I remember eternity, but I have a sense of it. When I experience the eternal, I do have a sense of it, and I do have a sense of knowing it. So yeah, so please don't feel like don't put any separation between you and I. Don't in any way imagine that I am up on a stage or that I am there's lots of people all kind of facing me, because I've been in that situation myself. I've been through the guru grinder, and I can see how it had its place, but not anymore. Not anymore. And now we need to be up close and as personal with people who we are inspired by, so that we can see that just like us, so that we can say, yeah, I could be like that too. I could do that too, rather than, oh no, they are so special. Look at them up there. Look how shiny they are. Oh no, I'd never. I'm no, so not shiny. Yeah, we don't want that anymore. That's finished. So, I'm just kind of settling down. I had a lot of technical stuff running around, organizing all these. There's a lot of. I'm looking at a sea of cables. Well, not a sea of cables, but lots of cables and lots of wires and microphones and doohickeys and all sorts of things. So I am just kind of settling down from organizing all that and into the real meat, I suppose. Meat that's pretty good coming from a vegan. The meat of the the essence of what we're here for, what we're doing here. So these Zoom chats, let's call them chats, Zoom chats. Yeah, that sounds better. These Zoom chats are, yeah, they're a chance to interact. I try to organize things so that people could take as much or as little as they wanted. So I've got the daily meditations, and you can just meditate along with me, and that's beautiful. Or you can ask me questions once it's not like a really complicated question that's very hard to answer, on Instagram or Facebook Live. Um, and then you can watch those videos afterwards. Or you can read my books. So you can read those and you can, partake in that to help with this further emergence. Because it's going on a lot. It's a lot of it going on at the moment in all sorts of ways. Just locally here, I've been hearing stories about different people doing very strange things, very out of character things. And it's, as I kind of look into that and meditate on it, it's a version of the kind of disruption that further emergence causes. Um, because there's a feeling of, or, well, not a feeling, there's a, what would it be called? Kind of a idea that if you're in a hard place, that you're just like, "Oh, I just want to change it all. I just want to change everything. I just want to be a completely different person." And while that the essence of that might be true, it's very hard to change everything. It's not hard to do it, but it's very disorienting. It's like, like I did a lot of personal development trainings in the late 80s, early 90s. And they were the sort of cathartic kind of personal development trainings where you'd come in on a Thursday or Friday and you'd leave Sunday. You'd be a different person on Sunday. And I saw it many times with people, with myself and with other people. I can remember when I went through my first one, I had previously been doing a video production course and I did well in it, but it finished. And then I went away for the summer and I was in America and I was doing all sorts of filming stuff, and they were giving an award for the best student of that class, and I won it. And the course I was doing it in was in Kerry, where I live now. But back then I was, in Dublin, and to come down to Kerry, it was like a 5-hour bus journey, which I used to do when I was doing the training. But then I'd been to America and so on, and things had happened to me. I was a different person, and I, I did this personal development training the weekend before I was to come and receive my award. And I mean, I was so like cool about it. I'm like, I'm such a busy and important person, because when they rang up to tell me I'd won the award, I was like, oh, that's great. That's fantastic. And they're like, well, can you come down to get it? To receive it. I was like, well, hang on now. Yeah, that's going to be really hard. I think I had a job. I think I was working in an animation studio when I came back from America. So, I wasn't being completely rock star about it, but I was a bit. And they were like, well, we'll fly you down, right? Now, back then, I flew to America and I'd fly to England or something like that. But to fly internally in Ireland, like Ireland is a small country. So to fly, the plane goes up and it comes down very quickly. So yeah, I was like, yeah, okay, if you'll fly me down, I'll come down for it. And then I went and did the personal development training. And, I went in on the Thursday and I came out on the Sunday. And, like, in the final process, there's this beautiful process, and you have your eyes closed, and you form this ring in the room, big ring, circle, big circle. And they play this really moving music, and I'd been through so much, and I'd shed so much, and I'd let so much go. I was like standing there listening to this music, and you're supposed to have your eyes closed, right? I was like sobbing my eyes out, right? Sobbing my little heart out, listening to this music. I think it was Neil Diamond. They were really into Neil Diamond in that. I can't remember what the song was, but I was like, yeah, Neil, you fucking, yeah. Anyway, I opened my eyes, and my mother and my brother were in front of me, right? And my brother, who'd been through the training, right? My brother Paul, he'd been through the training as well, that this person development training before me. So he knew what was going on, and he was like, yeah, John. But my mother, who perhaps had been through the training as well, but my mother was like emotionally, she was a bit of a toughie, and she was like cringing because she must have been standing there looking at me sobbing my heart out, just feeling a lot of emotions she didn't want to feel in a group of people she didn't know. So it was very funny to open my eyes and see my brother, like, beaming, and my mother, like, very kind of feeling uncomfortable. Anyway, so the next day I went to the airport and got on the plane, and I was tripping. I was totally tripping. I was blissed out on all this stuff. And, like, I'm a bit embarrassed about it now, because the guy who was the teacher for the personal development thing, like I was in the plane, I was kind of sobbing a little bit, to myself, because it was an overcast kind of day, and then when the plane went above the clouds, there was a sunshine. It's like, oh my God, the sun is always shining above the clouds. It's so beautiful, man. So yeah, poor old Paul Dolan. When he picked me up in the car, I was like, practically, I love you, man. I mean, I didn't say that to him, but he just knew there was something really different about me. And yeah, I kind of waltzed through the award ceremony in a haze of love and peace, and it was lovely. But the point is, that really cracked something open in me. But it didn't take long before I reorganized myself into a fairly close version of what I'd been before. Maybe a little bit different, a little bit more open, a little bit more loving, a little bit more spontaneous. And that's not because, I failed as a personal development person. Not at all. It's from my understanding of how it works, and I read a very good description of this in one of Carlos Castaneda's books. Carlos Castaneda is this guy, and I'm probably going to, spoiler alert, I'm going to give lots of probably misinformation about Carlos Castaneda. So if you're curious about Carlos Castaneda, look him up and get the correct facts, because these are probably all going to be wrong. Because I just remember stories and the gist of the story, and then the rest is a bit soupy. So he had Carlos Castaneda was a researcher who went to Mexico, I'm pretty sure of that. And through one thing and another, he got in touch with, or came in contact with a shaman whose name was Don Juan, which I always thought was a terrible name for a shaman slash guru, because Don Juan, I always associate him with the romantic Don Juan, the seducer Don Juan. Anyway, so Don Juan was explaining something to him one day, and they were in a restaurant, and he was explaining about reality and how we organize it. And Carlos was like not getting it, and he said, "Okay." Don Juan says, "Okay, reality is like this table. Okay, it's got the salt and pepper and the cup and the spoon and the plates and everything is, and you know where everything is on the top of the table, and it's great." And he said, this isn't reality. This is just what you know, this top of the table. And if you move something on the table, you get a bit disoriented because you're in there and you go, I know where the salt is, I know where the pepper is, I know where the spoon is, I know where the cup is. And if you move too much of the table, of the stuff on the table, you become really disoriented. And if you want to really blow your mind, look under the table, because under the table is, just hit the mic there, under the table is what's really going on. That's where the real reality is. But it's so spacious and empty to speak of that you'll just lose your mind pretty fast. So don't be in a hurry to change everything on the top of the table, because the knowing where all the different things are helps keep you sane. I've always remembered that, and I've seen it in practice, because even though if the salt is your low self-opinion, and maybe if the pepper is your anger at your parents, I'm just making this up, right? And maybe if the cup is, being shy or something, or being angry, and you kind of go, yeah, I just want to wipe the top of the table. I just want to get rid of all that stuff. It can be really, really disorienting, and you can feel like you're going crazy. And often, it's a case of just moving the pepper a little bit, and then move it a little bit more, and then move it a little bit more, and little by little, and over time, you can move it wherever you want, and you can get it off the table if that's what you want. And I've seen it with people as well who've made huge changes, and then they say, oh, I've got pushback from that. And it's like, well, it's probably not pushback. It's probably just your system's naturally regulating mechanism to sort of keep you sane. And in some cases, I've, said to people, well, maybe just do something, something that, will just help you ground yourself in some way or another. Like if you had, like say you were, if you changed like 3 or 4 major things, and you still had this thing that you were, and all positive things, but you still had this thing that was a little bit, maybe you like to binge watch TV or something, and you felt a little bit bad about that, and you'd done all these other great things, but you were feeling really disturbed, and you didn't know why. I'd maybe just have a bit of a binge on the telly, just to sort of ground everything. And it's kind of like walking around the table going, oh yeah, there's the salt again. Oh, okay, all right, everything's fine. In a weird way, even though all the stuff on the table is very personal, like your anger and your shame or whatever it is, what I'm talking about is to do with orientation, and that's kind of impersonal. So there's a lot of this going on at the moment. It's almost like the table has been whacked at the side, hit hard, and everything is a bit skew-if for everybody. So in a way, everybody's kind of gone through further emergence in one way or another. And it's just some people are maybe more conscious of it than others, but it seems like everybody, that's a nice sweeping statement, everybody is going through it. That's what it looks like to me. And it's got all the hallmarks of further emergence. It can be painful, disorienting, and it can come out very sideways if you're not conscious of it. So yeah, if you're dealing with people, I encourage you to be kind to them, because it doesn't really matter what they're saying or doing unless they're trying to hurt you, physically hurt you. It will be this in action in one way or another. So I think the best way to treat everybody is if you've ever come upon a car accident and nobody's hurt but everybody's shaken, think of how you would be with those people. You wouldn't be going, well, what speed were you doing, and were you wearing your seatbelt, and how come the car is that way? I don't think maybe you were at fault. You wouldn't get into anything like that with them. You just be very kind to them. You might even put your arm around them. Come on, sit down, take it easy. I'll get you a cup of tea, and just here's a blanket or whatever. And you just, because they're in shock. Everybody's in shock at the moment, as I see it. So yes. So yeah, this these little Zoom chats are a chance just to talk about it, because it's just really helpful to talk about it. Particularly when everything's moved on the table on you too suddenly, too quickly, and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, it's just nice to talk about it. Not that I will have all the answers or not, but I do have quite a bit of experience of it, and I can reflect some things back to you. Sometimes they'll be great, sometimes they'll be off, but that's the way it is with everybody. But the fact of hearing yourself saying it can crystallize. I find this with myself a lot. There's something powerful about talking and saying it out. And as I'm saying things, often I'll be to one side going, wow, yeah, that's it. Hadn't really put it all together, but yeah, that's what's going on. So I don't know how long I've been chatting there. Geez, I've really been chatting for 25 minutes, and I was about to say I do better, much better with questions, because from my experience, there's something that happens inside me when I'm asked a question. Something comes up to answer. I don't know what it is, and I rarely know what I'm going to say before I say it. And there's something, magical that happens in the interaction between me and another person when I'm asked a question about a particular thing. Because, I'm just quite happy on my own. I don't really need to, give forth. I write the books. I try and, when I'm writing the books, I try and get it down in paper, in words, as best I can, what's going on inside and how I see things. But, at the supermarket, I'm not stopping people going, hey, do you know here's what's going on with reality, and hey, let me tell you the story about Carlos Castaneda, Not at all. Not at all. So, you'll get the most out of me if you ask me questions. And like, I really enjoy questions because then I get to hear what I have to say as well. So I had a question sent in. Let me get it. Now, it's from somebody, and English is not their first language. They say, I'm really fascinated by your story and your work. Thank you. I have lots of limiting beliefs that have kept me isolated for many years. I'm trying to break out of this. Is it more helpful to identify initial traumas and understand what they're teaching me, or is it better to use a kind of hypnosis to rewrite those limiting beliefs? I've trouble with intimacy. I really long for a girlfriend who understands me and can partner with me, but I seem not to have the patience to give. This is the same on a larger scale. I don't feel anything valuable to give others. I think they mean I don't feel I have anything valuable to give to others. And I don't feel wanting to help others, as I can just barely help myself. And I don't feel wanting to help others as I can just barely help myself. Right. Now my wife is just, I can hear my dogs barking. If you can't hear them, great. But that's my dogs barking. My wife's just come into the house. So there's quite a bit in that question. It's kind of two bits. There was the bit about the trauma, and there's the bit about giving and wanting to give. So should I identify the initial traumas and understand what they're teaching me? Trauma is a funny thing. There's so many levels to trauma and aspects to it. The touch is a huge component in trauma in terms of helping to release it. Now, unfortunately, at the present time, it's very hard to get touch therapy that can really help, because everybody has to wear the masks and it's very clinical and very removed. So it's tricky, but it is very powerful, because trauma gets, there's the bit of trauma that we can remember, and then there's the trauma that's locked in our cells, in the cells of our body. Now, if that sounds a bit hard to get your head around, if you think of, they're not used very much now, DVDs. Well, you could think of your phone, really. Your phone and watching a movie on your phone and crying about it and getting really upset about it. And when you look at your phone, it's just bits of plastic and metal. Like, it's just nothing really. But yet, you're crying and you're getting, upset. So your cells of your body are a lot more complicated than bits of plastic and metal. So it's not it's not hard for me anyway to um, think that they could, in the same way that your phone could store the movie or stream the movie. The movie comes through your phone, you have bits of plastic and metal and silicone and whatever else is in there. It's not hard for me to understand that your cells could hold the memory just in your cells and then, under the right circumstances, release that memory with everything. And you could be crying and they mightn't be up in your brain. Well, your brain's just made of cells as well. So having some kind of touch therapy, I mean, of course, I'm going to say craniosacral because that's my field of expertise. But, there are other ways of doing it. But touch is powerful in helping to release trauma. Just even being held, physically being held, can release a lot. I'm not trying to make you feel worse about the no girlfriend thing, but I'm just, saying those kind of things can help. Then the other thing is not to define yourself by your trauma, because I've worked with loads of people, treated many, many people for trauma of one kind or another. And they, like most people, have trauma. Their traumas, in a way, shape us. Uh, they make us who we are, in a way. That's not to say they're good and that we shouldn't get rid of them or anything like that. But it's more a case of, particularly if you've had a profound trauma happen to you, it can be very easy to, because it's had such an impact on your life, to feel like that if people only understood how traumatized I am, then I would, um, then they would know why I'm behaving the way I am. And how can I move on? How can I get on with my life when I have this huge trauma that happened to me and the injustice of it? And that's valid. It's valid. The injustice is valid for sure. But it can you can get stuck. You can get stuck in the trauma, and you can it becomes, rather than it being part of what made you, it just becomes you. It's like that's your story. Your story is of your trauma. Like I had pretty bad trauma happen to me when I was 3, and I didn't really remember it until I was in my late 30s, and it was really shocking to remember it. Um, and I can see how it would be. There's a space there for sure to kind of go, oh, hang on, where did I tell you what happened to me? You know, because most people, well, no, most people don't want to hear about it. Not because they don't care, but because it's like it's horrible. Who wants to hear that? Who wants to hear what happens to, a trauma that happened to a 3-year-old kid? I don't. I mean, I've sat with and worked with people gone through all sorts of traumas at all ages. It's never pleasant. So, and that's, the therapist is trained to do that. So your average person in a social situation does not want to go there because they probably have trauma themselves and they don't want to. Your trauma reflects their trauma. It's like, oh no, where's the drink? Where's the alcohol or the drugs or whatever? So yeah, don't let the trauma define you. And then a more empowering way to kind of view your trauma and everything about it is to take responsibility for it. And I don't mean that in a harsh kind of take responsibility, grow up. I don't mean it like that at all. I mean, it's a choice. Like, you can feel like it happened to you or you happened to it. It's really up to yourself. Meaning, I talk about this in my book, Why Do We Get Sick? Why Do We Get Better? And how I arrived at this was through working with people with terminal or life-threatening, not terminal, life-threatening conditions. Because the question of why does one person get sick and another person not get sick, that was something I've always been very interested in my adult life. And why somebody would go into life-threatening, I found that very fascinating, because I wanted to help the person, because they'd come to me for help, but I didn't really understand what was going on, because just in the craniosacral work that I was doing, there was kind of 3 levels, or 2 levels really. There was like physical things, like the person fell down, or they hurt themselves, or they had an accident. So it was really, that was between themselves and the environment. Something happened to them. Or maybe they had emotional issues. So their parent did something, said something to them when they were a child, hurt them in some way or another, not physically, just emotionally. And then that trauma would print out physically. So they might come with migraines or back pain or something like that. And then it was coming from this root cause in an emotional issue. Whereas it was like, no, I fell down when I was 10. That was a physical thing. The trauma was just the physical trauma. And the physical trauma would still be printing out in their body. And then there might be an emotional problem, and that might be printing out physically. And then there were people with life-threatening stuff. And that seemed to be, it had an emotional component, it obviously had a physical component, but it seemed like there was something more going on. Some mysterious, another layer underneath the emotional stuff. And, I mean, I have a predisposition towards spiritual things and spiritual life, but I wouldn't call this area spiritual, because it didn't matter whether the person was spiritual or not, or into spiritual things. It was still in this area. So I would just kind of think of it as in the mystery. It was in the mystery of the person. And as I looked into it, what was going on? Why would this person have a life-threatening condition and not that person? It sort of became clearer about what I call the question. So to sort of get an idea of it, I always think of like a kid running in the back garden or the backyard. And they just love to run and jump all day, running and jumping. Yay, I love running and jumping. That's just all they did all summer. And then towards the end of the summer, they're just running by the window, and through the window they see the TV, and on the TV is the Olympics. And on the Olympics is this event, the hurdling event, where they jump over the hurdles. And the kid is just transfixed by this image of the people running over the hurdles. They're like, wow, because this is like running and jumping heaven to this kid. And he can't believe like how many hurdles they're able to jump over, and she can't believe how fast they're going, and they're going, wow, I wonder if I could be that good. I wonder how good I could be at doing that thing. And that sticks in their mind. I wonder how good I could be at hurdling, which is another way of saying how good I could be at running and jumping. So they, tell their parent, and they join a local athletics club, and one thing leads to another, and they're pretty good at it, and they win their local races, and then they win their regional races and national races, and then lo and behold, 10 years later or whatever, they find themselves at the Olympics in the, I'm going to guess here, 400-meter hurdles. I don't know how long those races are. The big hurdles race, just before the starter pluses the gun. Pluses the gun, fires the gun. And what's happened is they have adopted a lot of restrictions. They can only run between the lanes. They can only jump over hurdles that are a certain height. They can't just go when they feel like it. They have to wait for the starter to fire the gun. They, get into the little block things before they start, and there's a finish line. So there's a lot of constraints that has, what started off as very free running and jumping, has become very constrained, and all to the service of this question that they had: how good can I be at running and jumping? So just hold that for a minute. When, if you ask anybody, and I've asked loads of people these questions, and I'm going to ask you them now, right? Most people, well, I'll ask you the questions first, right? And so, why were you born the gender you were born? Why were you born to the parents you were born? Why were you born in the location that you were born in? Why were you born at this time and at the time you were born and not another time? Now, most people, if you ask them in a social situation, they'll be like, well, I don't know. But most people, in their heart, while they don't have an answer for those questions, they don't think it's random. Even hardcore, atheists or science people who are really into science, will kind of go, oh yeah, it's all random, right? But somewhere to themselves, looking in the mirror, they feel there's a significance to those questions. They don't know what the significance is, but they feel that there is a significance. So, in my experience, you could think of your life, as similar to that running and jumping kid at the Olympics. And that all the answers to those questions, why you chose the gender you chose, why you chose the parents, the location, the time, are all voluntary constraints that you adopted to help you answer a question about yourself. The kid's question was, how good could I be at that? Your question is individual to you. Again, this comes from my experience of working with people with who the life-threatening stuff seemed to always be to do with this question. And it's not like everybody has the same question and we're all just trying to figure it out. No, it's not been my experience. And what the question is different for everybody, and it's a paradox because it's unknowable and yet you have to wonder about it. And the longer you live, the more all the circumstances in your life seem to rotate around this question. And like, I don't know what my question is, but I regularly wonder about it. And the trick is to wonder about it gently, to tread lightly with the wondering. Because as I say, it's a paradox. You have to ask, but then you can't go insane if you don't get the answer. Because, people who have read my book and they're like, oh, I think I know what my question is. I'm like, oh, that's great. But I have a feeling that we don't want to know the answer. On that deep level, we don't want to know the answer. Like somebody coming up to that kid just before the starting pistol went and said, you know what, you're going to win this. I've come back from the future to tell you you're going to win this race. While that would be nice, some part of the kid would be, you probably know this in your own experience. Not everybody's like this. Some people like to know the ending of movies, but most people don't. Most people, when you say to them, oh yeah, I saw that, it's great what happens at the end, they go, stop. Don't tell me the end. And you go, no, it's good. I mean, it gets very scary and you think it's not going to go well, but it's a really, and if they tell you the end, you're like, for God's sake. And you're like, and they'd be like, well, why? I thought you'd want to know. Like, I got very distressed when I thought they weren't going to make it, but they do make it. You're like, that's it. I'm not going to even watch the movie now. Because there's something about, we're not actually interested in the end, the end, knowing the story. We're interested in the experience of watching the movie. So I think it's the same with life. I think we we want to experience life, our life, the unfoldment of our life, without knowing what it is. There's something that captivating about the mystery of our life, about the not knowing. In script writing, they call it jeopardy. Well, it's one of the things they call it. Jeopardy. Like if there's no jeopardy, it's not that exciting. So on the one hand, you have to be wondering, what is my question? And then on the other hand, you have to understand that you're never going to know the answer to that. And those questions I asked at the beginning, it's not just limited to those. You can expand that to everything in your life, which is beautiful, I think, because it means that you can take full responsibility for everything. Not because it's your fault, or not because you did it, or not because you can see how you did it, but it's just you decide to accept responsibility for it, or take responsibility, and you go, yeah, everything that happened, I made all this happen. I made it all happen because I've got this question that I want to answer about myself. I don't know what it is, but I made all this stuff. I've got all these clues, about what it might be about, right? And abuse and trauma and everything like that fits into it. And again, let me just restate, I'm not diminishing trauma or abuse or anything awful that happened to you. Of course I'm not. But for me, looking at this in this way feels a lot better than feeling like just being blown around by the wind for no apparent reason. And I don't really mind whether I'm right or not, because I enjoy it more. I enjoy my life more when I look at it from this perspective. Because people can get very obsessed about that they want to know what's really, really, really real. And it's a bit like Don Juan talking about the table. It's like it's under the table and it'll blow your mind. So if you touch off it, you're doing great. But mostly it's just what's on the table, whatever. So, and it's a perspective. So I just like the perspective about this question and this wondering. So I choose it. I just choose to view my life in that way. And I don't think I'm right or wrong. It's just a choice. And again, that is a bit like what I was saying about treading lightly. So you can view your initial traumas in that perspective. And then I think you'll miss some of the potential of them if you just rewrite them without exploring them in this kind of context. But yeah, if they're too much and it's too overwhelming, sure, yeah, try hypnosis. If it's really important to you in your to this question, to this part of you, they'll come back anyway. You won't be able to rewrite them because this question, I'm just calling it that, drives your life, in my experience. It is kind of ruthless. Like it will, it'll make a person very sick if they lose interest in their question, or they get very, distracted by it, or it's too hard. They don't want to, and these are not judgments. These are just my observations. And they're my observations based on, like when I was working with people, of course I'm working with them physically, or, distance-wise, it doesn't really matter. But there's working with them with behind the scenes, let's just call it that way, whether that's, hands-on physically or distance physically or whatever. And like it's not like I was like, okay, so let's just figure your question out. It wasn't so much that. It was just for me to sort of have a sense of where the root cause of the problem was. Was it physical, was it emotional, or was it this deeper thing? And if it was in this deeper thing, it was like, oh, okay. So it was almost like, wandering around in the dark and coming across this room, this doorway on the mystery or this person's question, and the root cause is in here, and I go, oh, okay. And it wasn't a case that the door was never open for me to go in there. It was more a case of like, that's where this is resolving. Like, okay, fine. I would work from the outside. And as the person got reconnected with it, or more in tune or more harmonious with whatever that their question was, their symptoms would go away and they would get physically better and they would get more in alignment with all that. So it's very powerful. So you could try and use hypnosis to get rid of your those beliefs. And if it's important to you for your question to include them, they'll just come back. And if it's not important, they'll be gone and it'll be great. Now, the other thing about trouble with intimacy and really longing for a girlfriend who understands me, but I seem not to have the patience to give. I think that's beautiful because it's such beautiful self-knowledge. Like, I know lots of people who are nowhere near that. Like, I haven't spoken to this person, but just the tone of what they're writing. It takes a very big heart, I think, to feel like you, to know that you're not giving as much as you want to. Because you couldn't know you're not giving if you didn't have it in you to give. It's the beginning of giving, is to go, oh, I know what the potential is. I know what it is to give, but I just can't do it. That's you're almost halfway there. Because even just saying that, even just writing it to another person that you don't really know, that's a huge thing. There's a lot of power in that, of feeling it. I mean, it's very easy to kind of look at yourself and yeah, it is judgment. You could say you're judging yourself and going, I'm really failing here. I'm really doing badly. But, to have the knowledge of that to start off with is incredible. Like to be able to, because I really get this sort of feeling of like, oh, I am letting myself down, or I wish I could be that person. Like, just even having that wish, that's the beginning of it. Because what comes along pretty soon after that is the reasons that are getting in the way start to become apparent. I mean, I don't like to make predictions, but just from my experience, just writing that and going, oh, I'd love to have a partner, I'd love to have a lovely girlfriend, I long for a girlfriend who understands me, can partner with me. But, what did I say? I seem not to have the patience to give. That will come. That will absolutely come. I mean, I think it's probably a recipe for disaster, expecting people to understand you. Because, well, it's hard enough to understand yourself at all, even closely. I mean, I've spent most of my life not trying to understand myself, but self-reflecting. And I know I probably know a couple of percent of myself, and the rest is a mystery. And I'm all right with that. And I'll keep looking. So to expect or to have this idea that somebody else should understand you, yeah, that's just going to make you miserable. And I understand it. Like, I've a feeling that rather than it's to do with being understood, it's the feeling of being seen and being heard. That's really important. The feeling of being seen and being heard. And it can be very painful if you don't feel seen or don't feel heard by anybody. And if you're on your own, yeah, it can feel like that. But in my experience, the most helpful thing to do with that is, well, there's a few things. With emotional pain, the most efficient way to deal with it is to face it. And it can be very hard, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. And just depending on where you're at and what's going on, it can be too much. I get that. So I'm not talking about extreme, where you need to see a professional about it, where you need to go and, see a psychologist or get, help. I'm not talking about that. Well, it gets to the point of feeling like it might harm you or you might harm yourself, then you need help, for sure. But just the normal kind of stuff. And it's understandable why we don't do it, because, if you put your hand in the fire, I mean, who puts their hand in the fire? But anyway, just as, you know what I mean. If you put your hand in the fire, you're just going to pull it away automatically. So if you stumble onto an unpleasant feeling, you're just going to want to recoil from it. That makes perfect sense. Except it's the other way around inside. It's like, if you had an emotional fire inside, that was your emotional pain, and you accidentally put your finger in it, and then you pulled your hand away. It's like the fire follows you, and you can't get away from it, and it gets brighter. And really, the only way out of it is through it. So, as much as you can, the most efficient way is to face it as best you can. And just face it for as long as you can, for as long as it's there. I don't mean you to be a martyr about it or a masochist or anything like that. Just face it as much as you can until it dissipates, or till you go through it. Because you do go through it. You just burst through. It's amazing what passes. Everything passes. Good stuff, bad stuff, everything passes. So if you can face it, you'll get through it the most efficiently. Right, how did I get there now? I'm getting a bit lost. Oh yeah, being understood and not being heard and not being seen. That can be very painful. So yeah, if you've got that going on, the more you face that in yourself, the less you'll want your future girlfriend or partner to provide that for you. One thing I've discovered is that if you can get out into nature, you can get a certain amount of reflection from nature. You can be seen and be heard a little bit by nature, which is lovely. So you can get a sort of a reflection there. But yeah, if you go into a relationship expecting your partner to understand you, yeah, that's not going to go well, because it's so hard. Because we are so immersed in our own realities, not like self-absorbed. I don't mean that. We just are. It's like, I sort of think of it as everybody is in their own little reality bubble, and sometimes the bubbles come close together and we can communicate with each other. But mostly they're very isolated little bubbles, just kind of. So if you can get any kind of communication going with people, it's a miracle, I think, that we can communicate at all. I mean, I don't want to go off on a big tangent about reality and existence. Maybe that'll be for another time. But any kind of communication where somebody says, "Yeah, I understand what you mean. I think I get it." That's amazing. That's a miracle. That's the thing to focus on, not on this idea that someone could completely come into your little reality bubble and completely understand you. In my experience, that's not going to happen. And it's a lot to put on somebody else. So when you say trouble with intimacy, I'd have to ask you a little bit more about that, so I can't really address that. But yeah, the main thing is this thing of if you have it in your heart that you have this idea of like, yes, I kind of know what it is to give, I just can't do it. Don't focus on that I just can't do it. Just focus on the fact that you know it, that you know what it is to give. It'll come. It will come. The fact that you know that is fantastic. And I know it's probably hard and it makes your heart heavy. Like, oh, I have it in me to give, but I just haven't got the patience. Well, it'll come with patience. Ironically, with patience, it will come. Because it's a seed. You've got that seed within you of giving, and the fact that you feel like you haven't got the patience to express that, that's the beginning of it, beginning to unfold. Okay, I hope that was of help to you in your question. Thanks for sending me that question. Okay, so yeah, that's it for this little Zoom chat. I hope you're well. I hope you're of good cheer, and yeah, we'll talk again soon. All right, bye.